Welcome back to our journey through the Middle Ages. If you thought the early period was all about survival, get ready for a major plot twist. We're now entering the High Middle Ages, a 300-year span from around 1000 to 1300 CE, and let me tell you, Europe is about to get a serious upgrade. This is a time of incredible revival, booming populations, and groundbreaking ideas. It's the era of the Crusades, soaring Gothic cathedrals, and the birth of universities. So grab your textbook or just lean back and let's dive into one of history's most dynamic periods. It all starts, as it so often does, in the fields. The agricultural revolution of the High Middle Ages was a game changer. Imagine for a moment you're a farmer in the year 1000. For centuries, your main tool has been a light wooden scratch plough, which barely tickled the surface of the heavy clay-rich soils of northern Europe. You plant half your field and leave the other half fallow or empty to recover its nutrients. It's a tough, inefficient system that barely produces enough food to get by. But now a new piece of tech arrives: the heavy-wheeled plough. This beast, fitted with an iron blade, could cut deep into the earth, turning over that rich soil and dramatically increasing the potential of the land. Farmers also adopted a more efficient method of crop rotation called the three-field system. Instead of splitting their land in two, they divided it into three. One part was planted in the autumn with wheat or rye. The second was planted in the spring with oats, barley, or legumes like peas and beans, which were great for enriching the soil. The third field was left fallow. Each year, they'd rotate. This seemingly simple change had massive consequences. It meant more food was being produced, and not just more, but a more varied and nutritious diet. More food meant healthier people, lower infant mortality, and a population that began to grow and then boom. In fact, between 1000 and 1300, the population of Europe is estimated to have doubled, maybe even tripled, from around 35 million to nearly 80 million people. This wasn't just a comeback. It was an explosion of life that would fuel every other development in this era. With more people and a surplus of food for the first time in centuries, not everyone had to be a farmer anymore. People began to specialize in crafts like blacksmithing, weaving, and masonry. Small villages grew into bustling towns, and old Roman cities, long neglected, were reawakened. And what do people in towns do? They trade. A commercial revival swept across the continent. Roads were improved, bandits were suppressed by stronger lords, and major trade routes were re-established. Goods from the far corners of the known world started flowing back into Europe. Spices, silks, and precious metals from the east arrived in Italian port cities like Venice and Genoa. In the north, the Hanseatic League, a powerful network of merchant guilds, dominated trade across the Baltic and North Seas, dealing in timber, furs, grain, and fish. Annual trade fairs, like the famous ones in the Champagne region of France, became massive international events where merchants from all over Europe could exchange goods, currency, and ideas. This new vibrant economy gave rise to a powerful new class of people, the merchants, and artisans, the burghers, or the middle class, who would begin to challenge the old feudal order of nobles and peasants. Now, as Europe was gaining strength and confidence, its attention turned outward, specifically toward the east. This brings us to one of the most famous and controversial events of the entire Middle Ages, the Crusades. In 1095, Pope Urban II delivered a powerful sermon in Clermont, France. He called upon the knights and nobles of Christendom to embark on an armed pilgrimage to the Holy Land, to reclaim Jerusalem and other sacred sites from Muslim control. The response was overwhelming. Shouts of Deus vult, God wills it, echoed through the crowd. This kicked off the First Crusade, and over the next 2 centuries, a whole series of campaigns would follow. Tens of thousands of people, from powerful kings to humble peasants, took the cross and marched thousands of miles to the Middle East. Their motives were complex, a mix of genuine religious piety, the desire for wealth and land, adventure, and the promise of forgiveness for their sins. The First Crusade was surprisingly successful, capturing Jerusalem in 1099 and establishing a handful of Crusader states in the region, but holding on to them was another story. Later Crusades were largely a series of failures, counteroffensives, and sometimes bizarre detours, like the Fourth Crusade, which ended up sacking the Christian city of Constantinople instead. By the end of the 13th century, the last Crusader strongholds in the Holy Land had fallen. So were the Crusades just a massive, bloody failure? From a military perspective, mostly yes. But their long-term impact on Europe was profound. The Crusades dramatically increased contact between Europe and the far more advanced Islamic and Byzantine worlds. Returning crusaders brought back new goods like sugar, lemons, and cotton, and more importantly, new knowledge. They brought back ideas in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, including long-lost texts from ancient Greece that had been preserved and studied by Arab scholars. This influx of knowledge would help spark an intellectual renaissance in Europe. The Crusades also boosted the economies of Italian city-states that transported and supplied the armies, further fueling the commercial revolution we talked about earlier. As Europe grew richer and more confident, it began to express this newfound energy in stone and glass. This is when we see the birth of one of the most breathtaking architectural styles ever conceived, Gothic. If you've ever stood inside a great European cathedral like Notre Dame in Paris or Chartres, you know the feeling. You look up and the ceiling seems to soar into the heavens, with light streaming in through vast windows of brilliantly colored stained glass. This was a radical departure from the earlier Romanesque style, which was characterized by thick, heavy walls, rounded arches, and small windows, making the buildings feel dark and fortress-like. Gothic architects developed a set of ingenious innovations to achieve the opposite effect, a feeling of height, light, and grace. The first was the pointed arch. Unlike the round Romanesque arch, the pointed arch directs weight downwards more efficiently, allowing for taller structures. Second was the ribbed vault. By crisscrossing arches to create a skeleton of stone ribs, builders could fill the spaces in between with lighter material, reducing the overall weight of the ceiling. But the true genius was the flying buttress. These are the external stone arms that you see propping up the sides of Gothic cathedrals. They took the immense outward pressure from the tall walls and vaulted ceilings and transferred it safely to the ground. This brilliant solution freed up the walls from their load-bearing duties. And what do you do with a wall that doesn't have to hold up the roof? You fill it with glass. Huge, magnificent stained glass windows depicting biblical stories, turning the cathedrals into what some called Bibles for the illiterate, teaching the faith through vibrant, light-filled images. Gothic architecture wasn't just a building style. It was a physical expression of faith and aspiration, reaching for the divine. This intellectual ferment wasn't just confined to architecture. The High Middle Ages also saw the birth of a brand new institution that would shape the Western world forever, the university. As rediscovered knowledge from ancient Greece and the Islamic world poured into Europe, centers of learning began to form. Initially, these were informal gatherings of students around a famous master teacher. But soon they organized into formal guilds of scholars, just like craft guilds. These were the first universities. The University of Bologna in Italy, founded around 1088, became the leading center for the study of law. The University of Paris, established in the mid-12th century, was the capital of theology and philosophy. Soon after, Oxford and Cambridge were founded in England. Students from all over Europe flocked to these new institutions to study under great thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, who famously worked to reconcile Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology. The curriculum was based on the 7 liberal arts grammar: rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and led to higher studies in the 3 great professions of the time: law, medicine, and theology. There were no grand campuses at first. Classes were held in rented rooms or churches. But the core idea was revolutionary, a self-governing community dedicated to the pursuit and preservation of knowledge. This system of higher education, born in the High Middle Ages, is the direct ancestor of the universities we know today. So let's take a step back. The High Middle Ages was a period of incredible transformation. An agricultural revolution fed a population boom, which in turn revived cities and commerce. A newfound religious fervor and political confidence fueled the Crusades, which, despite their military failures, reconnected Europe with the wider world. And this reconnection, combined with economic prosperity, sparked an intellectual and artistic explosion, giving us the soaring beauty of Gothic cathedrals and the enduring institution of the university. It was an era that laid the foundations for the modern West, but this golden age of growth and optimism wouldn't last forever. As the 13th century came to a close, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Famine, war, and a terrifying plague were about to bring this remarkable period to a crashing, dramatic end, ushering in the turbulent late Middle Ages. We'll explore that catastrophic but fascinating chapter in our next video. Thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying this journey through history, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the final part of our medieval saga. See you next time!